Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Chipmunk here. Let's talk movies and short stories. That is to say, adaptions. And in this case, we have a movie that is based on a short story, which it turns out is based on a short story. I both love and hate these rabbit holes because this was something where I didn't have a lot of time, so I thought of something that would be really quick, and it turned out it wasn't as quick as I thought, but it was quick enough, and you'll see why. In this case, the movie is Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, which I own, but it's part of a collection, so it doesn't have its own cover, so here you are. The movie is based on Cornell Woolrich's story, It Had to Be Murder, also part of a collection, so here's the man himself. And it turns out It Had to Be Murder is based on another short story by H.G. Wells called Through a Window. So I'm going to go through that list. Let's go in chronological order, heading back. If only we had a time machine, but that's another story. Through a Window, written by H.G. Wells, published in 1894. Good old Herbert George Wells. He was born in 1866 in England, and an accident as a child left him with a long convalescent period, a broken leg actually, that got him reading voraciously. When his father had an accident that left him unable to work, the family took their sons out of school, and the unhappy H.G. had to become a draper's apprentice to help support the rest of the family, and that experience later informed a few of his stories. Later, he was able to win a scholarship to the Normal School of Science. While there, he helped to found the Science School Journal, where he was able to develop his writing skills. He also taught during this time, and one of his students was A.A. Milne. He could be quite the rake in his personal life, marrying, divorcing, marrying again, and having several love affairs and illegitimate children. He wasn't bored, I'll give him that. None of this interfered with his professional work, however, probably because he was a man, as he also produced such novels as The War of the Worlds, The Time Machine, and The Island of Dr. Moreau. So, enough about the author. The story itself, Through a Window, is incredibly short, but there is no doubt that it is the inspiration for Woolrich. We meet an invalid with two broken legs who is convalescing in a house with a big bay window by a river. Besides his housekeeper who sees to his needs and friends who occasionally stop by, he doesn't have much else to do except look out at said river and the people going by, the boats on it, and the inhabitants thereof. There is an early, rather intriguing point where one of the boats has a husband and a wife on it quarreling, and the quarrel actually turns violent, but the boat continues on. This is not the point of this story. Instead, we are shown that many servants on these boats are of Indian extraction, and so are many servants in the surrounding area, colonial England, and all that. And it is one of these who appears in the invalid's point of view, armed and being pursued by a small group of white men. Through a visitor, the invalid is able to discover that the armed individual attacked several people, and the other group of men is a posse sent to bring him down or bring him in, as the case may be. The invalid watches all these proceedings with the delight of a theater goer watching a play on the stage, right up until the point when the Indian fellow with the knife attempts to seek refuge in his home and attacks him before getting shot. This is the end of the story. There's not much more to it than that. And it's definitely dated, but there's also definitely the element of suspense. And you can see the basic elements within it, which Woolrich and then Hitchcock based their versions of the story upon. It Had to Be Murder, written by author Cornell Woolrich under his pseudonym William Irish. As to the author, bear with me, I've always enjoyed going through these things. Cornell George Hockley Woolrich was born in 1903 in New York City. He went to Columbia but left in 1926 before graduating. After winning a few short story competitions, he wound up in Hollywood working at First National Pictures. He married the daughter of the head of Vitagraph Pictures, but the marriage did not last, possibly because of his exploring his sexuality by engaging in necessarily clandestine homosexual activity. Unable to gain a foothold in the movies and his jazz-age novels being passed off as unserious, he scrapped it all and decided to reinvent himself as a pulp novelist, writing many works, not just this one, that were published under pseudonyms. After his mother's passing, he became more of a recluse and neglected his health, necessitating the removal of a leg, I'm picking up on the theme here, due to gangrene. His career made him quite a lot of money, all of which he left after his 1968 passing to Columbia U, for the establishment of a scholarship in his mother's name. Estate issues have made many of his works slow to be reissued, and there are quite a few which can be found for free online. Now, this story is 13 pages long, so it's longer than the other one. And on the site that I found it, it appears to have been retyped because there are several typos and one line at least seems to be missing. However, it is an enjoyable story, and it's certainly an updated version of Wells. We have our protagonist, Hal Jeffries, recuperating in an apartment with a broken leg, with his black servant, yes, there is some dialect writing, this was 1940, whatever, stopping in every day to see to his needs. Being a short story, as with Wells, we don't find out a lot about Jeffries. There's not a lot of backstory or anything like that, other than he has friends on the police force. This serves to put more focus on what he's focusing on, the action and what he's seeing happening out the window. There are a few differences from the movie, I will say, such as what the husband did with his wife, and then the ending, which is this big police shootout. But again, the basic elements are there. There's the invalid who is in an inescapable situation. There are the different human lives and situations. Here, one of the neighbors is a single mom who works as a prostitute. Can't think why that didn't make it in the 1950s movie. Then there's the crime and the eventual turnaround on the viewer. Here in this story, we have the addition of the viewer out the window needing to solve the crime. And that definitely helps to flesh things out. Both stories are different in setting and style, but it's neat how the basic idea works for each one. And finally, Rear Window, 1954, released by Paramount Pictures. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock, starring James Stewart and Grace Kelly. 112 minutes. Stewart is the freelance photographer who rests up in a simple New York apartment after an accident leaves him with a broken leg. Kelly is his socialite would-be fiancée. This being pre-computer or cell phones, Stewart, who is not much of a reader either, passes much of the time staring out the window into those of the apartments around him, getting to know the neighbors in this way. It is not exactly moralistic to peer into people's private lives, a fact which gets him a few lectures, but also enables him to discover and eventually solve a murder. The supporting cast is also excellent, with notables Raymond Burr as the murder suspect neighbor Lars Thorwald, the inimitable Thelma Ritter as Stewart's hired nurse, and Wendell Corey as Stewart's skeptical old army buddy who now is on the police force. But mention should also be made of the bit part actors who make up the denizens of the complex, including radio actress Sarah Berner as the woman whose dog comes to a sad ending, Jesslyn Fax as Miss Hearing Aid, the sculptor, who also appeared in North by Northwest, and most notably, Ross Bagdasarian as the composer. If his name is familiar, that's because it should be, most particularly to boomers and Gen X. A real musician, his stage name was David Seville, and a few years after this film, a gift of a recorder which could speed up one's voice led to the American icons Alvin and the Chipmunks. Although having just rewatched this film, I am now wondering, and let me know if any of you know the answer to this one. His character creates a music piece, continually played throughout the film, gets the attention of the other characters, and it's very much a point. The piece is called Lisa, after Grace Kelly's character. However, with Bagdasarian being both a pianist and a composer in his own right, I am wondering if it was him who wrote that piece, or if it was Franz Waxman, the composer of the film. Anyway, the movie still holds up today, and I can say that definitely, because I just rewatched it a few days ago with my 12-year-old, their first viewing, and they were definitely in suspense at the ending. I kept looking over and they were like, oh boy, what's gonna happen? Although they found the first hour or so a little too talky, which, yeah, it is, so that might be a bit much for wee ones. Although the scene with the dog, that scene, still devastating. Of course, anyone who's seen the film can testify to the fantastic setup that puts us, the viewer, in the perspective of Stuart, the viewer as voyeur. Stuart watches out his window as we watch through the window of film. But the notable differences are A, film is done with the knowledge and permission of those being watched, and B, in real life, it takes one slight shift in perspective for the watcher to become the watched, which is set up and alluded to throughout the movie, but still, it's a thoroughly brilliant filmic moment in that it's still a shock when it happens. Although I did also realize, quick point, that the point where the dog dies, we come out a little bit, don't we? We start focusing more on the other characters and they start interacting with each other, when before that, they've been each to their own world. So this is part of the setup towards that shock point when things come back to Stuart. The peppy, jazzy soundtrack is a great background to modern city life, and some of the shots, like that one that's a pullback from the outside back through the window to Ritter giving Stuart a massage, it's just, oh, I love that. Plus, it's another instance of our viewing the outside but not going there. We are stuck in this one spot just like Stuart, which adds to the claustrophobia and suspense of the ending. This is still a great classic film that everyone should go and watch. And it was part of one of the greatest attractions at Universal Studios, which is now sadly defunct, and I am still salty about this. So I will just leave this video here for now. Other than to, again, reiterate, yes, if you haven't watched this film for some reason or another, go do that now. So, have you read these stories and have you seen the movie? I want to know it all in the comments. Please, let's discuss. Until next week, let's get through it together somehow. Okay, we can do this. You can do this. Hang in there, champ. I'm pulling for you. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you next week. Bye now.